Hello everyone, I'm Chloe and I'm 32 years old. I'm sitting here today, sharing a story that has shaped my entire life, a narrative woven through the subtle threads of family, belonging, and the quiet sting of dismissal. It's a story about finding my voice in a world that often tried to silence it. My journey began in the seemingly idyllic suburbs of Fairfield County, Connecticut. It was a place of manicured lawns, sprawling colonial homes, and a quiet affluence that spoke volumes without ever needing to raise its voice. My adoptive parents, the Whitakers, were pillars of this community. They were respected, influential, and embodied the very essence of old New England charm and tradition. From the outside, our lives looked perfect, a picture of suburban bliss and privilege. Yet, beneath the polished surface, a different reality simmered, one that often left me feeling like an outsider. I was adopted as an infant, brought into a family that was outwardly loving but inwardly complex. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, already had 2 biological children, Sarah and David, who were several years older than me. They were the golden children, reflections of their parents' legacy. From a young age, I sensed a subtle distinction in how I was perceived. It wasn't overt unkindness, but a pervasive sense that I was different, an addition rather than an integral part of their original design. This feeling was amplified during our frequent family gatherings. These weren't casual dinners, they were formal affairs, often held in the grand dining room, where every word and gesture seemed to carry unspoken weight. Discussions about family history, heirlooms, and future plans often unfolded around me, making me feel like a quiet observer. I remember one particular Christmas dinner when I was about 7. Sarah and David were excitedly discussing their future boarding schools, institutions steeped in Whitaker family tradition. I listened, my small heart yearning to be part of that shared lineage. My mother, Eleanor, gently patted my hand and said, "Chloe, dear, you'll find your own path, a wonderful path." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they subtly reinforced the idea that my path would always be separate, distinct from theirs. The family meetings, as we called them, were a regular occurrence, typically held quarterly to discuss family investments, philanthropic endeavors, and social obligations. These were serious discussions, where opinions were weighed and decisions made. I was always present, seated quietly at the large mahogany table, listening intently. My siblings were encouraged to voice their thoughts, their contributions met with nods of approval from my father, Robert. My own quiet observations, however, rarely found an opening. I learned to read the room, to understand the unspoken rules of engagement. My role, it seemed, was to absorb, to be polite, and to blend in, rather than to contribute meaningfully. It was a silent lesson in my place within the Whitaker hierarchy. The racial disparity was always present, a quiet undercurrent in a predominantly white community. I was a child of color in a family that was not, and while it was never explicitly stated, I felt the difference in every social interaction, every curious glance. My parents prided themselves on their progressive views, often mentioning their open-mindedness in adopting me. Yet, this pride often felt like a performance, a way to signal their virtue rather than a deep understanding of my unique experience. I yearned for genuine connection, for a space where my identity was fully embraced, not just tolerated. The affluent suburb, with its polished veneer, often felt like a beautiful cage, where my spirit longed to break free and truly be seen. This early environment instilled in me a deep sensitivity to subtle forms of discrimination and a quiet determination to define my own worth, independent of external validation. It was the beginning of my journey to find and amplify my own voice. As I grew older, the subtle stings of being an outsider became more pronounced, though still cloaked in politeness and good intentions. My parents were meticulous about my education, enrolling me in the best private schools in the area. I excelled academically, driven by an innate desire to prove myself. Yet, outside the classroom, navigating the social landscape of my peers was a constant challenge. I was often the only person of color in my friend groups, and while I had friends, there was always an unspoken barrier, a sense of being perpetually othered. My adoptive family, while providing every material comfort, seemed to struggle with understanding my cultural identity. Conversations about my heritage were rare and often superficial, quickly redirected to topics they felt more comfortable discussing. I remember once expressing an interest in learning about my birth culture, a fleeting curiosity I voiced during a family dinner. My mother responded with a hesitant smile, suggesting it was less important than focusing on your future. The message was clear: assimilate. My siblings, Sarah and David, were generally kind, but their understanding of my experience was limited. They lived in a world where their identity was seamlessly integrated with their family's history, a privilege I could only observe from a distance. During family meetings, discussions often revolved around their achievements, their college applications, and later, their burgeoning careers. My own accomplishments, while acknowledged, were often framed differently, as if they were pleasant surprises rather than expected outcomes. I recall a moment when I presented a project I had worked on for a school competition, a detailed proposal for a community garden initiative. My father praised my diligence, but then quickly turned the conversation to David's acceptance into an Ivy League university. It was a pattern. My efforts were appreciated, but never quite elevated to the same level of significance as those of my biological siblings. This constant, subtle devaluation chipped away at my self-esteem, making me question my inherent worth. The family's social circle was predominantly homogeneous, and I often felt like a curiosity, a testament to the Whitakers' generosity. Polite inquiries about my background were common, often followed by well-meaning but ultimately dismissive comments. "You're so articulate, Chloe," one of my mother's friends once remarked at a garden party, her tone implying surprise. It was a compliment that simultaneously felt like an insult, a reminder that I was being judged against a different, lower standard. These microaggressions, though seemingly small, accumulated over time, creating a heavy weight on my young shoulders. They were not outright acts of racism, but rather a constant, subtle reinforcement of my perceived difference and inferiority. I began to internalize these messages, believing that I needed to work twice as hard, be twice as perfect, just to be considered equal. This pressure was exhausting, leading to moments of quiet despair and a deep sense of loneliness. My room became my sanctuary, a place where I could be authentically myself, away from the watchful eyes and subtle judgments. I found solace in books, in art, and in the quiet exploration of my own thoughts and feelings. Despite the emotional toll, these experiences also ignited a fire within me. I started to question the norms, to see the subtle biases that permeated our seemingly perfect world. This quiet rebellion was the first step towards finding my own voice. I realized that my worth was not to be determined by external validation or by fitting into someone else's mold. It was a slow, painful awakening, but one that was absolutely necessary for my journey of self-discovery and empowerment. As I transitioned into young adulthood, the chasm between my family's expectations and my own aspirations grew wider, becoming increasingly difficult to bridge. My siblings pursued careers in finance and law, following the well-trodden paths laid out by generations of Whitakers. I, however, found myself drawn to social justice and community advocacy, subjects that resonated deeply with my personal experiences. I pursued a degree in sociology, focusing on systemic inequalities and the power of collective action. My parents, while supportive of my academic pursuits on the surface, often expressed their concerns about my chosen field. "Chloe, dear, are you sure there's a stable career path in that?" my mother would ask, her brow furrowed with polite worry. During family meetings, when discussions turned to career trajectories, my siblings would proudly share updates on their corporate promotions or lucrative deals. When it was my turn, I would speak about my internships with nonprofits or my research into urban development. My contributions were met with polite nods, sometimes a brief, "That's very noble, Chloe," from my father, before the conversation swiftly moved back to more practical matters, usually involving investments or property acquisitions. It felt as though my work, which I found deeply meaningful, was viewed as a hobby, a temporary diversion before I would eventually settle into something more suitable for a Whitaker. Their subtle dismissal of my passion was disheartening. I remember a particularly frustrating family meeting where I tried to introduce the idea of the Family Foundation diversifying its philanthropic efforts to include more grassroots community organizations. I had done extensive research, identifying several impactful local groups. My father listened patiently, then dismissed my proposal with a wave of his hand. "Chloe, our foundation has established relationships with reputable institutions. We don't venture into unproven territories." His tone was final, leaving no room for discussion. It wasn't just my career, my personal choices also came under subtle scrutiny. My friends, a diverse group from various backgrounds, were often met with polite but distant smiles during family gatherings, rarely invited for deeper engagement. I once brought a friend, an aspiring artist from a working-class background, to a family dinner. My mother later commented, "She seems very spirited, Chloe. Perhaps you should broaden your social circle to include those more aligned with our values." The implication was clear. My choices were not quite up to the Whitaker standard. This constant pressure to conform, to align myself with their rigid definitions of success and social acceptability, became increasingly stifling. I felt a growing sense of alienation, a profound loneliness within the very family that was supposed to be my anchor. The beautiful home, the affluent community, all began to feel like a gilded cage, designed to contain and control my true self. Despite the emotional toll, this period also solidified my resolve. The more they subtly dismissed my path, the more determined I became to forge it. I realized that my worth was not contingent on their approval, but on my own integrity and purpose. I began to seek out mentors and communities that truly understood and celebrated my passions. These connections became my lifeline, reinforcing my belief that my voice, though unheard by my family, had value and deserved to be amplified. The chasm was widening, but it was also becoming a space for me to build my own bridge, a bridge to a future where my voice would not just be heard, but would resonate deeply with those who truly needed to hear it. The defining moment of dismissal arrived during a particularly tense family meeting, one that felt different from all the others. It was late autumn, and the air in the formal study was heavy with unspoken tension, thick with the scent of old money and unspoken expectations. My grandfather, a formidable patriarch who had founded a significant portion of the family's wealth, had recently passed away. His will was being read, and the family was gathered to discuss the future of the Whitaker Family Foundation, a cornerstone of their legacy. I sat quietly, as always, observing the somber faces of my parents and siblings. The foundation was a major philanthropic entity, and its direction held significant weight for the family's public image and influence within the community. My father, Robert, began outlining the proposed new board members for the foundation. He listed Sarah, with her background in corporate law, and David, with his expertise in financial management. Both were logical, expected choices. Then, he paused, looking around the room. I held my breath, a tiny flicker of hope igniting within me. Perhaps, this time, my years of dedicated work in social impact and community development would be recognized. And for the final board position, my father continued, his gaze sweeping past me, we've decided to invite Mr. Harrison Thorne, a respected figure in the city's banking sector. His financial acumen will be invaluable. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. It was a direct, undeniable dismissal. My qualifications, my passion, my lived experience in understanding the very communities the foundation claimed to serve were completely overlooked. Sarah offered a polite nod of agreement, and David murmured his approval. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged the silent blow that had just been delivered. I felt a profound sense of invisibility, as if I were not even present in the room. My mind raced, replaying every subtle slight, every overlooked contribution, every whispered doubt about my chosen path. This wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a public declaration of my perceived inadequacy within the family structure. I wanted to speak, to challenge their decision, to demand recognition for my expertise. But the words caught in my throat, choked by years of internalizing their subtle messages of unworthiness. The weight of their expectations was crushing. I felt the familiar sting of tears welling in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I straightened my back, a quiet resolve hardening within me. This dismissal, painful as it was, would not define me. It would, instead, ignite a fire. In that moment, a shift occurred. The desire to gain their approval, which had subtly driven so many of my actions, evaporated, replaced by a fierce determination to prove my worth, not to them, but to myself and to the world. I realized that their inability to see my value was not a reflection of my capabilities, but a reflection of their own narrow perspective. My voice, though unheard in that room, would find its resonance elsewhere. I left that meeting with a quiet dignity, but also with a burning conviction. The dismissal was a painful end to one chapter, but it was also the powerful, undeniable beginning of another, one where my true voice would finally emerge. The aftermath of that defining family meeting was a period of intense introspection and quiet revolution. The pain of being overlooked by my own family fueled a new kind of determination, a resolve to build something entirely my own, something they could not dismiss. I allowed myself a few days to grieve the loss of a dream, the dream of being fully accepted and valued by the Whitakers. But then, a fierce energy took hold, transforming my hurt into purpose. I realized I had been seeking validation in the wrong place. My focus shifted entirely. Instead of trying to fit into their mold, I decided to pour all my energy into what truly mattered to me, creating tangible, positive change in the world, particularly for marginalized communities. I started small, volunteering even more extensively with local nonprofits focused on education and economic empowerment. I used my skills in research and strategic planning to help them secure grants and develop more effective programs. I spent countless hours networking, attending community events, and connecting with individuals who shared my vision for a more equitable society. These were people who saw my potential, not my perceived limitations. One particular organization, a mentorship program for underprivileged youth, became my passion project. I saw in these young people the same yearning for opportunity, the same need for a voice that I had experienced. I developed a comprehensive curriculum for the mentorship program, focusing on leadership skills, financial literacy, and self-advocacy. I drew upon my own experiences of feeling dismissed, using them to craft lessons that empowered others. My work was demanding, often requiring late nights and early mornings, but it was incredibly fulfilling. For the first time, I felt truly aligned with my purpose, building something authentic and impactful. My parents and siblings, still immersed in their world of corporate boards and social galas, seemed oblivious to the depth of my commitment. They would occasionally ask about my volunteer work, their tone still carrying a hint of polite condescension. They couldn't comprehend that this volunteer work was, in fact, my true calling, the foundation upon which I was building my own legacy. It was a legacy not of inherited wealth, but of earned impact. I began to speak at local community forums, sharing my insights on systemic barriers and the importance of empowering diverse voices. My early speeches were hesitant, but with each one, my confidence grew, and my voice became clearer, stronger. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People resonated with my story, with my passion, and with my practical approach to social change. I was no longer just Chloe, the adopted daughter. I was Chloe, the advocate. This period was the genesis of my true voice. It wasn't a voice that sought to argue or demand recognition from my family, but one that spoke truth, inspired action, and built bridges within the communities I served. I was finally stepping into my own power, transforming my past pain into a powerful force for good. The dismissal had not broken me, it had liberated me, setting me on a path to discover my true purpose and impact. My work with the mentorship program and various community initiatives began to gain significant traction, creating an unmistakable echo that reverberated far beyond the quiet confines of my family's social circles. What started as a passion project quickly evolved into something much larger. The mentorship program, which I had poured my heart into, started receiving local media attention. News articles highlighted its success stories, featuring the empowered youth and the innovative curriculum I had developed. I was invited to speak at regional conferences on youth empowerment and social equity. My presentations, once hesitant, now commanded attention, filled with conviction and the raw truth of my personal journey. I spoke about the importance of seeing and valuing every individual, regardless of their background, and how true progress comes from amplifying marginalized voices. My words resonated deeply with audiences, sparking conversations and inspiring action. Word of my work even reached some of my parents' acquaintances, though indirectly. I would occasionally hear through mutual connections that someone had seen an article about Robert and Eleanor's adopted daughter doing remarkable things. It was a strange sensation to be acknowledged through the lens of my adoptive family, Yet to know that the recognition was for something entirely my own, something they had initially dismissed. Their subtle condescension was slowly being replaced by a quiet, perhaps grudging, respect. One pivotal moment came when a prominent philanthropic organization, one that had previously funded many of the Whitakers' preferred charities, approached me directly. They were impressed by my work and wanted to partner with my program. This partnership brought significant funding and expanded the reach of the mentorship program exponentially. It was a validation that transcended personal feelings, a recognition from a respected external entity. I remember receiving an email from the organization's director, praising my visionary leadership and profound impact. It was a stark contrast to the dismissive words I had heard in my family study. My voice, once unheard in my own home, was now resonating in boardrooms, community centers, and even in the pages of local newspapers. It was a powerful testament to the fact that true value cannot be suppressed indefinitely. I didn't seek out my family's approval, but their awareness of my growing influence became undeniable. They saw my name in print, heard my voice on local radio, and witnessed the tangible impact of my work in the community. The family meetings continued, but my presence felt different. There was a new, unspoken acknowledgement of my presence, a subtle shift in the dynamics. I no longer felt like a quiet observer, but a force to be reckoned with. I realized that my voice didn't need their permission to resonate. It simply needed a platform, a purpose, and the courage to speak its truth. And now, it was echoing loudly, unmistakably for all to hear. This was not about proving them wrong, but about proving myself right. My impact was my answer, my voice was my legacy, and its resonance was the most profound validation I could ever receive. Years passed, and my work continued to flourish, evolving into a nationally recognized foundation dedicated to empowering marginalized youth through education and advocacy. My voice, once a whisper, had become a powerful chorus. I was invited to speak at major conferences, consulted by policymakers, and featured in national publications. My foundation, built from the ground up with passion and unwavering dedication, was making a tangible difference in thousands of lives. It was during this time that I received an unexpected invitation, a formal request from the Whitaker Family Foundation to attend a special board meeting. They were seeking new perspectives, they said, particularly in the area of community outreach. I hesitated, the memories of that dismissive meeting still vivid. But I realized this wasn't about seeking their approval anymore. It was an opportunity to bring my expertise and my foundation's mission to a larger platform. I arrived at the familiar family estate, the same grand study where I had once felt so invisible. My parents and siblings were there, along with the other board members, including Mr. Harrison Thorne, the man who had taken my spot years ago. The atmosphere was different. There was a palpable shift, a quiet respect in their gazes. My father, Robert, introduced me not as our adopted daughter Chloe, but as Ms. Chloe Maxwell, founder and CEO of the Resonate Foundation. I presented my foundation's work, detailing its impact, its innovative programs, and its vision for expanding opportunities. I spoke with confidence, drawing on years of experience and the countless stories of lives transformed. I didn't shy away from discussing the systemic barriers faced by the youth we served, or the importance of truly understanding diverse communities. My voice was clear, articulate, and unapologetically passionate. I noticed my mother, Eleanor, listening intently, a thoughtful expression on her face. Sarah and David, now accomplished professionals themselves, nodded in agreement at various points, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine interest. Even Mr. Thorne, initially reserved, leaned forward, asking insightful questions and acknowledging the depth of my organization's impact. The room, once a place of quiet judgment, now felt like a space of genuine engagement. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, then a round of applause. My father spoke, his voice tinged with a new humility. "Chloe, your work is truly inspiring. We, the Whitaker Foundation, would be honored to partner with the Resonate Foundation." It wasn't an apology, not explicitly, but it was an acknowledgement, a recognition of my worth that transcended their previous biases. My voice had not only resonated deeply, it had created a bridge where none had existed before. This was a new kind of family meeting, one where I was not dismissed, but celebrated for my unique contributions. It was a powerful moment, not of triumph over them, but of my own self-actualization. I left that meeting with a sense of quiet satisfaction. My journey had come full circle, not by conforming to their expectations, but by boldly forging my own path, proving that true resonance comes from within. The partnership with the Whitaker Family Foundation proved to be a significant milestone, not just for my organization, but for me personally. It wasn't about external validation anymore, but about the profound satisfaction of seeing my purpose fully realized. My foundation continued to thrive, expanding its reach and deepening its impact across the country. We launched new initiatives, established more mentorship hubs, and advocated for policy changes that truly benefited underserved communities. I continue to speak, to write, and to lead, always remembering the quiet girl who felt dismissed in a grand dining room. That memory fueled my commitment to ensure that no other voice, no matter how small, would ever be silenced. My relationship with my adoptive family evolved. There was a newfound respect, a quiet understanding that transcended their earlier biases. We didn't dwell on the past, but the present was built on a foundation of mutual acknowledgement. My mother, Eleanor, occasionally called to discuss my work, her tone now genuinely curious and admiring. My siblings, Sarah and David, would sometimes attend my foundation's events, offering their support and even volunteering their expertise. It was a different kind of family, one built not on shared lineage or societal expectations, but on a growing appreciation for individual contributions and diverse perspectives. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I also found a deep sense of belonging within the community I served, a family of purpose that truly saw and celebrated me for who I was. Their stories, their resilience, and their triumphs became my greatest source of inspiration. My journey taught me that dismissal, though painful, can be a powerful catalyst. It can force you to look inward, to discover your true strength, and to build a life that is authentically yours, independent of external approval. The subtle discrimination I faced, the feeling of being othered, became the very foundation of my advocacy. It gave me empathy, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to fighting for justice and equity for all. My voice, once dismissed, now resonated deeply, not just in boardrooms, but in the hearts of the young people whose lives I touched. It was a voice of hope, of empowerment, and of unwavering belief in the potential of every individual. I learned that true worth is not measured by status or wealth, but by the impact you have on the world and the authenticity with which you live your life. My net worth, in terms of purpose and peace, was immeasurable. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or undervalued, know this: your voice matters. Your unique experiences, your passions, and your dreams hold immense power. Don't let anyone else define your worth or limit your potential. Use that feeling of dismissal as fuel, as a catalyst to find your own voice and make it resonate deeply in the world. Your journey may be challenging, but it is uniquely yours, and it has the power to inspire, to transform, and to create a lasting echo of purpose. Thank you for listening to my story.